Om Sadashiva Samarambam Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Param Param Ishvaro Guratmeti Mochi Veda Vibhagine Vyomabda Vyapta Dehaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha Sahava Vedanta Sedanta Gocharam Tamagocharam Govindam Paramanantam Satiguru Pranatoshmaham Om Om Shanti 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 Om. I think I get I have a WhatsApp open here. I need to. No. Okay. Any ideas for today? We have seen last week, the last verse we covered was the 17. How can that by which the whole universe is known be known by anything other than itself? It says everything. The whole universe is known by this only source of knowledge called Chit. The entire universe is known by this very principle called consciousness, Chit. So how can this Chit that knows everything be known by anything other than itself, if it is the only source of consciousness, knowledge, right? So it is impossible to imagine that it could be known by something other than itself. And that brought us into some nice conversations last week, to make the point that consciousness knows itself by itself. Every time it appears as the Jiva Atma and somehow develops this impulse to inquire into in its true nature, its true nature of this apparent reality. And that takes us to the verse 18. The self knows all that is knowable. There is no one to know it. So now again, the same statement, but seen from a different angle. Everything that is there to be known, the self knows, consciousness knows, all that is knowable. And how about unknowable? Is there such a thing as unknowable? So anything that is knowable, the self knows. And how about something that is unknowable? If we take unknowable to be ignorance, that is known by consciousness as well. Because consciousness stands beyond knowledge and ignorance. So the self knows all that is knowable. There is no one to know the self. It is consciousness or knowledge itself. And it is different from both the known and the unknown. Nice. Now it brings the unknown here. It is awareness. It is consciousness, as I prefer to use. or knowledge, which is a wonderful word because it establishes Brahman, consciousness as this knowingness, this knowledge principle, that by which we know things. So that is consciousness, that is knowledge. And there is nothing else that can know it. It is knowledge, consciousness itself, and it is different from both known and unknown. So again, this consciousness, this knowledge, this pure consciousness, pure knowledge, is something beyond knowledge and ignorance. It's beyond duality. So that's where the statement, I know what I know and I know what I do not know. One of very favorite statement of Ramji, I know what I know and I know what I do not know. Why? Because I'm beyond knowledge and ignorance. It does not matter, oh, I don't know this, I don't know that. Yes, but I am that which is beyond what is known and what is unknown, and what I do not know, but it's known. So consciousness stands alone as something different from the known and the unknown, knowledge and ignorance. The creation appears in 4 factors. Number 1, consciousness. Number 2, the knower, the Jiva, the pramata. And then the pramata knows by the means of the pramanams. Pramanas are the means by which it knows, which means the instruments of knowledge, the 5 sense perceptions, and the mind that brings about inference, that draws inference. So the creation is consciousness, and then appears Jiva as the knower, or the pramata in this technical term. And then we have the pramanams, the means of knowledge, the instruments of knowledge. And then we have the objects of knowledge, prameya. Then we have the pramata, pramanam, and prameya, the Jiva Atma, the instruments of knowledge, and the objects of knowledge, prameya. The instruments of knowledge can only function in the field where the objects of knowledge do exist. It cannot objectify consciousness, and it cannot objectify itself either, or it cannot objectify the agent. The agent is the Jiva, the knower, the pramana, the pramata. No? So the instruments of knowledge can only objectify and know the objects of knowledge. It cannot objectify consciousness. It cannot objectify itself, and much less the Jiva, the knower, the pramata. The pramata is the one operating the instrument, so to speak. So it happens spontaneously, but we are aware of the instruments of perception, and the instruments of perception, they are not aware of us. We know them, they do not know us. So these instruments are very, very inert by nature. They don't have self-reflection or self-consciousness. They are just inert matter. But it has a wonderful function, which is to connect with their respective objects of experience, knowledge. It connects, and then once it connects, knowledge, experience takes place. It takes place as long as the Jiva knower, the pramata, is there present, bring its mind, and then supporting the sense organs, these instruments of knowledge, and then paying attention and having an experience. Because as we know, if the mind is not backing up this process, experience does not really take place, or knowledge. No? The instruments of knowledge can only function in the field where the objects of knowledge do exist. So the point here is that everything is known by the grace of the self in association with the Jiva knower, but with the aid of the instruments of knowledge, the pramanas. And then, of course, the objects of knowledge must be present, so that creation is complete. And the self then is right there having an experience of itself in duality, so to speak. So it's happening there now. The creation is complete. We have the Jiva, the instruments, the objects of knowledge, and then we have experience knowledge taking place. And then there is a point that the instruments of knowledge are very good to connect with the object. The instruments of knowledge, there are 5, and they connect to their 5 different qualities or types of objects. And it's a wonderful pramana, it's a wonderful instrument. But the point here is that it cannot know itself because it is inert. It cannot know the Jiva. Much less it cannot know the self. Now it goes to say that these instruments of knowledge cannot know the self. And we were having a nice conversation last week, I think, who gets this knowledge, this self-knowledge? We could say, oh no, it is the sense organ. No, the sense organs cannot know the self. Oh no, it is the mind and the intellect that somehow coordinates the sense organs and bring and draws inference. And because I heard that self-knowledge is inferential knowledge. No, it is not. Self-knowledge is direct knowledge, aparoksha jnana. It's the self knowing itself in duality as reflected consciousness who contemplates and inquires in its own nature. So the instruments, they are dry, they are inert, they cannot know the self, it cannot know itself, it cannot know the Jiva. It can only objectify the objects out there, but never consciousness, never the Jiva, and not even itself. It's not self-reflecting and contemplating. It's inert matter. So this is the point here. Meaning to say, I mean, here we have covered the sense organs as something which does not have the power to know consciousness, and then we could go following the same logic, and then the term that the mind itself also cannot know the self, and the Jiva itself, in its substantial nature, cannot know the self either. So only the self knows everything. The self knows all that is knowable, and in that includes self-knowledge. So any knowledge takes place due to the grace of consciousness and consciousness alone. It knows everything that is there to be known. And there is nothing other than itself to know itself. It knows itself by itself, as we say. So excuse me just for a moment. The following verse 19, 20, how can we teach the idea that you cannot experience consciousness as an object, and that every act of knowing requires consciousness to people with dull minds, tamasic minds? So it's one of those moments, Vidyaranya, he starts feeling so frustrated. Then he says, how I'm going to teach this idea, that you cannot experience consciousness objectively. And every act of knowing requires consciousness. There is no way you know anything. There is no act of knowledge experience that can take place without the presence of consciousness. But how can we teach people that they cannot experience consciousness as an object, but as consciousness, they are that which is never not present, because every act of knowledge experience requires the presence of consciousness. So what is the big deal about experiencing consciousness as an object if I know that all of my experience requires the presence of consciousness, and consciousness is that which cannot be turned into an object because it is the absolute subject? So what is so difficult about that? But somehow we have people with dull minds or tamasic minds, or we have people with rajasic minds that they are so used with the go get mentality that when they come to self-inquiry and self-knowledge, they want to face consciousness, to meet consciousness face to face. Like on my own prayers, I used to say, so now I understood that I am you, you are me, but now I need to face you, to meet you face to face. I don't know if you remember me sharing that. And now I understand the absurdity of that in this very moment. In my prayers, I used to say, I understood all there is consciousness and I am consciousness, but now I need to meet you face to face consciousness. It is an old habit of wanting to taste consciousness somehow, having a conversation with consciousness, and all these funny notions we find in the spiritual world. It is shameful to say that I don't have a tongue. It is shameful to say I don't know consciousness, or I am not consciousness. Therefore, I want to experience and know consciousness. So it is a joke. The very fact of saying that I don't have a tongue implies that I have a tongue by which I can say I don't have a tongue. Likewise, I need to meet consciousness, like I used to say. Face to face, I need to meet consciousness. I need to be a conscious principle in order to have this desire to meet consciousness. Why? Because I want to get well acquainted, and have a good introduction and conversation and experience and knowledge of consciousness. So, but I am their consciousness through and through with this funny notion that I want to meet consciousness. What do you think, Claudio?
No, this is clear. This is clear. I only was thinking about, I don't understand why it says that you cannot objectify the agent, because before this verse that we are reading now, he says, I cannot objectify consciousness, and this is clear, or the agent who operates the instrument. But I don't understand this. We cannot objectify the agent, so we cannot objectify the jiva.
Yeah.
The only thing that we cannot objectify is consciousness, or also the agent. I don't understand it. Why it says
No,
this.
it's talking here about every knowledge. It's known by consciousness, and through consciousness, you need to have this cheat conscious knowledge present for knowledge to take place. Yeah? And then it presents this phenomenon of experience knowledge as consciousness, the first factor, and then the reflected consciousness, the Jiva Atma, and then the Jiva Atma, it uses its sense organs, sense instruments, the pramanams.
Mm-hmm.
And then these pramanas, they often appear as the means of knowledge. So where is the knowledge taking place? Oh, it's in consciousness. No, consciousness, this is too vague, it's too strange. Consciousness, knowledge is taking place in the five senses, because I can see, I can hear, I can taste, I can touch. So people get this impression that knowledge is only possible through the instruments, the five senses, okay? So, and then in here is trying to put down the instruments of knowledge, okay, which are the pramanams, saying like the instruments of knowledge, it's only an instrument, and it functions to know, and it does not know by itself. Who knows? It's the Jiva who knows, but it requires an instrument of knowledge. And the Jiva does not know anything without cheat, without consciousness itself. But here, the instruments of knowledge is being presented as something that has no power to know everything or anything. Only the self knows everything that's to be known. This is the point, you understand? The instruments, they don't. They can't even know themselves because they are not self-reflective. You understand?
Mm-hmm.
So they are not self-conscious that they say, okay, I'm perceiving everything. My eyes is perceiving everything. The whole world I see of colors and forms, I see, I perceive. And then he feels like I say, oh, now I want to see myself. No, it does not have this self-reflection, this self-consciousness of being, a sentient, self-conscious principle. No, it does not have that. So these instruments cannot know itself. And then we could believe that these instruments cannot objectify the Jiva, neither. The Jiva, the instruments of knowledge can only function in the field of the object. It cannot objectify consciousness, of course not, or itself, or the Jiva. You understand? The Jiva is subtler than the instruments of knowledge. When we see in the post, in the chart, the sense instruments, they appear in between the physical body and the subtle body. They are denser energy. So the denser cannot really objectify the subtler. So these instruments can only objectify that which is denser than itself, which is the material world. But then it cannot reflect on itself, it cannot objectify the Jiva, and much less consciousness.
Yeah. Okay.
Understood?
Yes.
So as far as having a tongue, we have no problem. Everybody has a tongue, so we are all free to speak. And likewise, everybody has consciousness, so we are all free to inquire and know. Knowledge, knowingness is present as our nature. So therefore, we should not contemplate the fact that I don't know consciousness, or I need consciousness, you understand? Or I want to meet consciousness. Because the very statement, I want to meet consciousness, I want to know consciousness, I want to experience consciousness, is self revealing. It reveals that consciousness is there making a statement, you know? It is a mistaken statement, the same way it would be in the case of the tongue who says, I don't have a tongue, you know? So how can consciousness say like, so I need to get to know consciousness. I need to meet consciousness. I want to have an experience of consciousness. And there you are, you know, as consciousness, as a conscious existing being, right? Anything else about that? Summary. Consciousness is a never experienced fact. Objects are only experienced when there is a relevant thought in the mind. So this is interesting. We say that consciousness is an ever experienced fact or principle or whatever. Fact is, I think, is a good word. So we always experience consciousness. So which goes against the idea that consciousness cannot be experienced objectively, but consciousness is a never experienced fact or principle, conceding its conscious existence to the intellect, so that the intellect can have a knowledge experience of the objects out there. So therefore, consciousness is a never experienced fact. Objects are only experienced when there is a relevant thought in the mind. So now we have this notion, this teaching about the objects are only experienced when the thought of the object appears in the mind. A relevant thought appears in the mind, and then the objects appear as a thought in respect to the objects. It appears in the mind, okay? So objects are out there. They are not different from the thoughts of the object, and they are experienced sometimes, okay? And not all the time, because there are certain states in which there are no thoughts in the mind. And then there is sometimes a different kind of experience of no mind, or emptiness, or silence, or void, or whatever. Okay, but it is a sort of object as well. Objects are only experienced when there is a thought. Without a thought, there is no object of experience. When the thought changes, the experienced object changes. So the thought changes. Sometimes you say, no, if I look out and I see a tree, I'm going to experience the thought of the tree, and it will never change for as long as I keep staring at the tree. No, because then another thought jumps from the causal body, and then Claude is there looking at the tree, but having a thought of his girlfriend, for example. You understand? So the thought is going to determine the experience. Without the thought, there is no object of experience. When the thought changes, the experienced object changes. In each objective experience, we experience two things. We experience the subject consciousness and the thought-dependent object. So now we are coming to the point here that consciousness is a never experienced fact. Objects are experienced out there, but only in association with a thought. It requires a thought. In fact, it requires two different thoughts. It requires the aham thought, and then the thought in respect to the object that contemplates in the mind. Aham and idam. So the objects out there are experienced by the means of thought. Without a thought, there is no experienced object. When the thought changes, the experienced object changes as well. In each objective experience, we experience two things: consciousness and the thought-dependent object. Okay, so we experience consciousness, and then we experience the aham thought and the thought, the thought object in respect to any other thing in duality. No, we know that there is is wonderful meditation of just being there, experience we call reflection of consciousness, but there is consciousness always ever present, and then when it shines in a very contemplative, meditative, sattvic mind, and then it produces this beautiful aham that does not connect with other thoughts. It's you bring your mind to stay focused on aham, I am, I exist. So that is also another beautiful experience. But here we are going all through until the object, and I just opened this parenthesis here to bring in the aham thought. So we have, in every common experience, we have the experience of consciousness plus the thought object. If I say that I am experiencing something, it means that I am conscious of the object of experience, because every experience requires what? The subject, consciousness, and the object, thought-dependent object, right? So how can I experience a thought-dependent object, but I refuse the notion that I must experience consciousness side by side or before that? You understand? Some people are stubborn and they will argue since forever, say, no, you don't need to experience consciousness to experience the thought, because consciousness is not the source of everything. Consciousness is something that is a byproduct of thought itself. Then, therefore, you can experience any thought and then reject consciousness. They say, no, I'm not experiencing consciousness. I'm experiencing this thought object. No, you cannot not experience consciousness in order to experience in the world. If I say that I am experiencing an object, a thought-dependent object, it means that I'm conscious of that object of experience. Consciousness is not evident because the thought that is creating the object seemingly distracts it. Distracts is a good word. So consciousness is there, always ever present, but because of the thought, consciousness permeates the thoughts, and then it reflects as an object of knowledge, an object of experience, and then it distracts from the Jiva Atma the fact that consciousness must be there in order for this thought-dependent object be experienced. It is not really clearly and evident because the thoughts that create the object distracts the Jiva Atma. In the absence of the thought, in the absence of experience, I still experience consciousness because I exist as consciousness. No thought is required to experience consciousness. So now we went full circle. Objects, they require thoughts in order to be experienced, beginning from the aham thought. But consciousness does not require any thought, neither aham, although it's said that the aham thought is going to purify the mind until the mind understands that I am the ever-present fact, okay? even in the absence of aham, like in the deep sleep, or in nirvikalpa samadhi, I am still there because I am consciousness. I exist always as consciousness. No thought is required to experience consciousness. Any doubt about that? That we do not need a thought to experience consciousness? Because somebody may come and say, no, it does not make much sense. Because I hear from the scriptures that I need the Aham Brahmasmi thought in order to experience consciousness. So that could be a good argument, Claudio.
No, it's clear that you don't need any thought. I find most difficult to understand the aham thought. I think it's very subtle. I understand very clearly that consciousness is always there, and it's always there. And the aham thought, it's really the aham thought. Sorry, it's really subtle, right? It's an object, of course, but it's really subtle.
Yeah, it's an extremely subtle object. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. Because it is through this aham that you know all other thoughts.
Yeah.
And then who knows this aham? So aham is known by consciousness, but consciousness is not a knowing entity. And then this aham must be known by reflected consciousness to the extent that it becomes so contemplative that it catches this aham thought as a source of limitlessness, bliss, satisfaction, peace, you understand? Until it understands that the reflection is identical to the original I, original aham, you understand?
But so, the aham thought, it's where happens the wrong identification, right?
Well, every day in the morning when we get up, there is this thought, I exist, I am. And then where that thought goes will somehow define ourselves.
Yeah.
So wherever it goes, it's going to, oh, I am late, I'm asleep, I am, and this and that. And then it takes me to those 5 koshas, levels of experience by which I define my I. But originally it comes as I, and it feels very good, the I, because the moment that I is identified with experience, it loses control, because experience pleasure and pain. It's a mixture of both. When we associate with objects of experience, the 5 koshas, to be more technically related here. So what is the subtlety about this aham? This aham is more easily understood in deep meditation, and you have been dealing or teaching and doing meditation. So when you go into that state of meditation, so you whether you know it or not, you are there just pretty much focused on this aham thought. You understand? So I am before I say I am this or that. You understand? You just say I am. So what is the purpose of meditation but to relax the mind, relax the body mind? And you need to withdraw the mind from every object. And the mind defines itself by the interaction with objects. When you just stop the mind from reaching the objects, all these thoughts, and then the mind relax, and then you see there is a sense of presence, not associated with object. So that is the aham that Nisargadatta Maharaj used to talk about. A thought feeling, aham, I am, I exist, before I define myself as having this or that experience.
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
Because we can think in terms of, okay, now I meditate, but my meditation is more like a selection. I want to select the thoughts dependent objects that appear to me, and I want to interact with good thoughts. Huh? So we may think like, no, I want to control my mental environment, and then I want to have nice thoughts, positive thoughts. Okay, so this is my meditation. But as we know, I mean, how long can we control our thoughts in the way of keeping only pleasant, pleasant and beautiful, positive thoughts? So and then we can go a step even deeper, and then you don't select the thoughts in respect to any object dependent experience, but you just stay as I am. It's a wonderful meditation. It works. It's the most direct meditation. Your mind becomes quiet, like nothing, like, because you are not out there trying to make a selection of the thoughts you want to experience. You just want to stay with this nice reflection of the original aham. Consciousness is not evident because the thought that is creating the object seemingly distract the Jivatma. In the absence of thought, experience, I still experience myself as consciousness because I exist at all times as consciousness. No thoughts are required. No thought is required to experience myself, not even aham brahmasmi. So what is the deal? The big deal then about this aham brahmasmi thought, because you probably heard me saying a few times that the problem with this meditation, aham, I am, I exist, is that the individual self, it still remains undefined. You understand? So we don't want to define ourselves by thought-related objects. You understand? No, I define myself by my beautiful house, my beautiful wife, my nice car. Or, no, I don't want to associate my I with any one of these objects. And then we go and we start just having this meditation, holding on to the I am thought. Aham. So it feels wonderful. It feels blissful. It feels limitless. You understand? You get all the fragrance of the original, pure, limitless aham. But the aham still remains undefined. It's the problem of just still being there, dependent on sattva. Sattva is producing a sense of existence, as aham, which feels very pleasant and complete and satisfied. Okay, but unless it is properly defined, chances are that this aham again associates with secondary thoughts and then defines itself by the means of these worldly thoughts. Are we following? No? It defines itself. No? So what is the importance of aham brahmasmi? Okay, And you don't need a thought, neither this aham brahmasmi thought to experience yourself. But one thing is to experience yourself, you can experience without even this thought. Huh? You can experience in any case, even with a rajasic mind, you experience yourself. Huh? But once you take that jump from aham into aham brahmasmi, and then you don't depend anymore in that mental environment on which the aham remains as pure as it can be, possibly staying, which is the environment which is extremely sattvic. And then we have this aham, it feels very nice, it feels very gratifying, pleasant, peaceful, and so on. But the mind changes. And then when the mind changes, and if you haven't defined yourself properly, what's going to happen? That's why Ramana Maharaj will say, so stay there and then ask, who am I? Who am I? Who am I? Because it's a question of definition. You need to define. You need to define your identity. You understand? And aham brahmasmi is just the final mantra that says, okay, you stay in aham, and then when time is right, you just, you stay there, contemplate that the aham is the same aham of Brahman, until it clicks, until it's clear. And then from that point on, the mind may change its environment, but the knowledge now is a paroksha knowledge. It was gained, it's direct. You understand? Now you do not depend on that certain sattvic quality to experience aham so that you feel satisfied. Now your satisfaction is based on the knowledge. Aham brahmasmi, I know I am that same consciousness in Brahman as Brahman. Do you guys understand this nuance or not? So no thought is required to experience oneself. And we don't need really the thought, aham brahmasmi. Once you know, you know. And even if you don't know, you are going to be experiencing yourself, but not really enjoying it because you're going to be under the spell of avidya. But once you know it, you don't need aham brahmasmi thought anymore. But before you know it for sure, aham brahmasmi thought is a good pramanam, it's a good means by which you're going to define yourself rightly. Yeah? The following verse, verse 21. If you turn your attention away from the perceived five sheets, awareness remains as an unnegatable remainder. Awareness is not non-existence. Pay attention to the ever-experienced awareness. Claim your identity as this consciousness. So if you turn your attention away from the world, we experience the worlds in this, within this, these teachings of the five different layers or dimensions of human experience. So we have these different pramanams, okay? So we have these five different sheets that allows us to connect with the world of object. If we turn our attention away from the perceived world through the five sheets, if we turn our attention and we pull our attention from the world, and awareness remains as an innegatable reminder. So what is the suggestion here? We heard about these suggestions all along our spiritual journey, to turn your attention from the world into the self, right? Pull, disconnect from the five sheets from the world and turn your attention away from the world, and then what you're going to do with it. And here it says something interesting. It says like, if you turn your attention away from the world, okay, from the 5 sheets or the 5 sense organs, howsoever we want to analyze experience, okay, if we turn our attention away from the world, consciousness remains as an innegable leftover or reminder. So it's not non-existence either. Pay attention to this ever-present, ever-experienced consciousness and claim your identity as consciousness, as this consciousness. So it reminds me of Swami Shimayananda, that he used to say, you need to disconnect from the world perceived through the 5 koshas, disconnect, disconnect. And he used to have a mantra there, disconnect and connect. Don't remain disconnect for too long. You understand? Disconnect and connect, disconnect and connect. He went to the extreme to say that the whole process of spirituality is to disconnect and connect. But then again, that takes us to some trouble, because how can we connect our attention to the self? We know that we got connected to the world, our attention, ignorance, extroversion, mental, has hooked us up with the world, and they say disconnect. And when you disconnect, he's saying here, but consciousness is going to remain there and cannot be negated. But it's not emptiness, it's not non-existence. It's that which is always ever experienced. Claim your identity as this consciousness. Okay? So it's the easiest way to disconnect, turn our attention from the perceived world, and then be established in consciousness as our true identity, is by disconnecting and connecting. But since consciousness is not an object of connectivity, so we're going to connect to the scriptural knowledge. We disconnect from the world, the perceived world, and we connect our attention to what? To the scriptures that reveals the fact that I'm always ever connected, because I am limitless consciousness. And then I claim my identity as consciousness. Does it make sense? Pay attention to the ever-present, ever-experienced consciousness. Again, this consciousness is being experienced 24/7, and we say, no, you cannot experience consciousness. Of course you experience consciousness, but not in the way people usually experience objects. But this consciousness is that which is ever experienced, without which no experience, objective experience, can take place.
Yeah.
Understand that and claim your identity as that consciousness. You are going to say something, Lynn?
I was going to ask if you could refine for me. So I've been practicing in activity, being aware of being aware, kind of as a meditation in activity, and then trying to make sure I understand that, and that's lovely, because that attention is love toward the self. So I'm really feeling a lot more bliss lately. But and then understanding that awareness is the ever evident I, and trying to incorporate those not property, product, and part property product or those four essentials. Is there anything that you could recommend aside from that for a meditation and activity? Or is that what you've been talking about?
Well, let me see if I understood your point here. You have been practicing a certain meditation or contemplation on the fact that that you are aware of awareness, you are conscious of consciousness. Is that what you said?
Being aware that I am aware, or being conscious that I, in your preferred, of consciousness.
Okay, so this is a very, very good sadhana, because as we are learning here, we are conscious, and we are consciousness, ever experience consciousness 24/7, at all times. And then we need to pay attention to that and be aware that I am a consciousness, that I am consciousness. I am awareness. Is that what you say? So, I mean, it is something that has a very experiential element of bliss, as you said. You understand? Because you are bringing the teachings to a practical level, and you see, you can pay attention to the fact of you are aware of your awareness from an intellectual standpoint, but there is a certain practical standpoint as well, because once we get the feel for it, you can sense consciousness shining in your intellect, in your mind, and then that has the power to permeate your day, and then you are in contact with consciousness, and you are conscious of consciousness. You are aware of awareness. You understand, as the ever-present factor, that somehow allows experience of the world to take place. It's very much like turn your attention from the world to consciousness. You are just like, okay, I'm paying attention to the world, but I'm never losing track or attention to the fact of consciousness as the light of the illuminator, revealing the world to me. So I'm aware of both worlds. The world out there through the five koshas, and I'm aware of awareness. So I'm in between. I am the Jiva Atma, and I am aware of consciousness even at the practical point of view, and I'm aware of the world as well. So it's a fine balance, that makes a whole difference on the way we experience ourselves and the world. And as sometimes they say, once you understood that you are consciousness, and consciousness is always ever present, you understand? And then there is a deep satisfaction of knowing that, and that is from standpoint of pure knowledge, knowing that I am this consciousness, even when the mind is a little bit depressed or stressed. You understand? I am this consciousness, and I'm aware of this consciousness, which is not depressed and it's not stressed. The mind is stressed, maybe stressed and depressed, but I am that consciousness, and I can also from this experiential level, I can also have the sense of, yes, I am that consciousness, which does not change, although the mind changes. The mind I don't have control over the change of the mind, but I have the power to know that what I am really does not change. You understand? It's consciousness. And that is another level that frees us from the need of having a sattvic mind while doing our interactions with the world. You said, I'm aware of my consciousness. I'm aware of awareness. You remain aware of awareness, even if the mind gets irritable, for example. You understand? It may feel a bit different, but then, that knowledge again and again has the power to set things in a proper perspective. That's okay. I am consciousness. I'm aware of consciousness. Mind is a little bit irritable, for example, but I am that consciousness which does not change. This is the magic of self-knowledge. That's why knowledge is that which is always available, always good at all times.
So you would suggest just keep with that practice? Is there a further step?
Well, the practice is very good. Remain aware of awareness, but don't make that practice dependable on having a very peaceful and sattvic environment.
No.
You understand?
Right.
So just enjoy and exercise your freedom from the mind. So you don't depend on the mind to be aware of your awareness, to be conscious of your consciousness. You understand? So you are conscious of your consciousness, but you do not depend on the mental environment. You understand? And then you are taking a step further. I'm aware of consciousness, and I'm aware that as consciousness, I'm free and independent from my mental conditions. Huh? So you look into it and then report next week to see if it did make any difference.
Okie dokie.
Okay. Anything else? Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, my dear friends. Namaste. We meet again soon, next Thursday. I hope that the Drisha is not going to break my mind again. Did you watch that one, Claudio? That heavy duty one?
Yeah, I enjoy it a lot.
Wow.
No, for me, it was very clarifying.
Good.
About something that was very interesting for me, the creation, this equation. This was very fun to hear for me. Very good. Very good. Thank you. And also today. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Very clarifying.
Appreciation is much appreciated. Okay. Again, love you. See you soon again.
Thank you. Ciao, ciao.
Ciao.
Thanks very much. Bye now.
Thank you. Bye.